this very special edition of the Armstrong Williams Show. There was chaos at the U.S. Capitol this week as Speaker McCarthy was the first speaker ever ousted from Speaker of the House in the history of the United States government. His ally, Congressman Patrick McHenry from the 10th District of North Carolina, is his acting Speaker pro tempore as they find a Speaker of the House. And one of the first acts of acting Speaker McHenry was to oust Nancy Pelosi from her private office in the United States Capitol. Where will the Republicans go from here? What is at stake? Will there be another government shutdown? Is the body fractured forever? Because as much as you blame Matt Gaetz for his uprising in the House and they're calling for him to be expelled, it was the Democrats that gave him the 200+ votes that were necessary to oust McCarthy from power. And believe this or not, McCarthy was a census builder. He wanted to work with the Democrats. It did not work out. Now they have a real issue on their hand. Republicans are unwilling to compromise. I'm Armstrong Williams, and welcome to this edition of the Armstrong Williams Show. Governor Mark Sanford, who's former governor of South Carolina, and congressman, and who Congressman Nancy Mace occupies his seat now, who was one of the 8 Republicans to vote for the ouster of former Speaker McCarthy, is joining us via from Tampa, Texas, in his hotel room. Governor, we welcome you to the broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure, yes, sir.
Will Jim Jordan be the next Speaker of the House?
I would doubt it. I mean, I just, you know, at the end of the day, Jim has been a firebrand, well regarded on the right, but I think there's been suspicion on the left. And given the way in which the party right now in Congress is somewhat fractured, I'd give the edge to somebody like Steve Scalise. Now, whether or not he has the health to do that right now, the crisscrossing of the state, raising money, and all that you have to do in the speakership role as you're fighting cancer. I mean, I don't know how you combine those two, but I think, you know, it would be something more in that direction than Jim Jordan would be my take at this point.
Should the House expel Matt Gaetz?
I don't think that that's constitutionally possible. So I don't see that on the horizon. I think he'll be expelled in the sense of you're not going to see a lot of guys and gals wanting to hang out with him within the Republican conference. I mean, I think he's isolated himself, which is its own form of expulsion, and I think he'll be less and less relevant given the way in which people have seen this sort of act of terror on the conference as they would view it. Anytime you can get it right with about 95% of the folks you're dealing with, you got it about right. And Kevin McCarthy had done that in the way that he got everybody but those 8. But that's the hand he was dealt, and that's what he was dealing with, and they leveraged it to maximum effect, in this case, making history.
You said unconstitutional, and it seems from what we've heard with Republicans going on different networks saying that Matt Gaetz showed them video of his sexual escapades, his sexual encounters, naked women, the fact that he had to be on the right drug to stay up all night to keep up with the pace of the women that he was conquering, and they're willing to go on the record, but they keep using the word expel. Is it something that you are aware of as a former House member that they're not considering? It's just more rhetoric than what can actually happen?
I mean, I don't know about these other things. All I know is at the end of the day, he gathered with 8 other Republicans and a bunch of Democrats to do something that was allowed within the very framework of what had been consecrated when Kevin became Speaker. I mean, that was the deal, in essence, if you want to think about it in layman's terms. I don't know that you can expel somebody. You may dislike them, you may avoid them, but I don't know you can expel somebody based on the rules of the House being prescribed to, in this case, in taking down a Speaker.
The 207 Democrats that voted against the Speaker versus the 8 Freedom Caucus members that voted against the Speaker. What is the correct narrative? Was he ousted by the Democratic House, or was he ousted by his own?
He was ousted by his own, but I don't know that he would describe those as his own. Mind you, those are folks that I think collectively he'd raised millions of dollars for in helping them to get elected or reelected, as the case might be. I don't know that I'd lay this all at the hands of the Freedom Caucus either. I mean, somebody like Jim Jordan is a member of the Freedom Caucus, but he did not vote that way, and he's leadership within the Freedom Caucus. So I think it's a number of renegades who had different personal grudges or vendettas against Kevin. I don't think, as much as they're trying to couch it now in terms of policy, that it was about policy. I think that going back to what you're alleging with regard to, Gates and different exploits, I think that it's more about a vendetta. I mean, apparently he was very upset about this ethics investigation into some of what he has been charged with on that front. He was upset with Kevin for not stopping it, which I don't think was in Kevin's hands. And I think it was a personal vendetta, which is, you've hurt me, therefore I'm going to hurt you to maximum effect. I don't care who the next speaker is. We don't have a plan going forward. We don't know what's going to happen with regard to the Republican conference, much less the Congress going forward. But I don't care. I'm going to blow you up.
Obviously, I saw an interview with Jim Jordan where he was asked about the funding of Ukraine, and he said that was not a priority for him if he were to become speaker, which indicates that for anyone who may become the next speaker, defunding Ukraine totally has to be a part of the commitment, as well as protecting America's borders all across the country. And also, the fact is that Kevin McCarthy was a consensus builder, and it is shocking that the Democrats would oust a consensus builder, somebody who's willing to cross the aisles to work with them, to get an unknown, whereas obviously this funding Ukraine it's a non-starter.
I'll be honest with you, I don't quite understand it. I mean, I get the nexus that people have tried to create, which is to say, look, we don't even have security on our southern border. Let's do first things first. But in light of the deficits that we're running, all the other bogus programs that are being funded in Washington, D.C., I don't get it, because some of the so I think that you need to secure the border first and foremost, get it. But the idea of not supporting a country like the Ukraine sends an incredible signal to the rest of the world as to what we're about. I don't get it, because the very same folks that are against some of the Ukraine funding now were the very folks supporting not billions, but trillions of dollars that we spend in the Middle East. And mind you, in the Middle East, American soldiers, airmen, Marines, whatnot, were dying because we were doing the fighting for them. In this case, you have Ukrainians that are out there dying and fighting against, again, an avowed aggressor to us, which is Russia. And we're saying, well, I don't know about this one. But wait, you just voted a couple of years ago to support all kinds of funding in the Middle East. I don't quite understand what's going on with that one.
Is it more likely, from your experience and the communications you have with your colleagues, that there will be a government shutdown?
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, it really depends on who you end up next as speaker. I mean, I think that there are a couple of different pieces to the puzzle that have to fall into place or out of place between here and there, and we don't know which way they're going to fall. I wouldn't at all rule it out, given how divided things are right now at this present moment in Washington.
How shocked were you when you first heard the news that the speaker was ousted?
I was totally shocked, because I hadn't been following it, because I'm back in business world and was not following it. And somebody mentioned it, and then I pulled it up on the web, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, there's a reason this has never happened before. This ain't an easy one, but it was, again, a perfect storm of, the narrowest working majority that Republicans have had really in the last 100 years, combined with some personal vendettas and animus, combined with Democrats who figured, what the heck, let's go ahead and embarrass this guy. Though he may have worked with us, he didn't give us all that we wanted. I mean, everybody has their beef in Washington, D.C., combined with a country that's fairly divided right now and a Republican Party that's equally divided. And so you combine all those things and you have a perfect storm And you had, again, history made the other night.
So Nancy Mace, who eventually became your successor, voted for ousting the speaker. And she's on TV all over the place saying she is being targeted by the establishment. Her money is drying up. They're targeting her for defeat. That is your former seat. Is this fair? Because McCarthy did raise a lot of money for her to keep that seat relevant for the GOP. That's just a fact.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. I guess Truman saying there that he put on his desk when he was president is pretty true, which is, if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. I mean, loyalty lasts about 5 seconds. I mean, the fact that so many of these different folks, again, had seen really substantial fundraising efforts on their behalf by Kevin, and yet they vote as they did, I think would at least be worth a personal conversation, not a surprise. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, and they got to do what they got to do. But I think when there's been that kind of help offered over a long period of time, you owe it to folks to at least have a conversation and not surprise somebody, which is what a whip count is all about. And obviously, again, Kevin thought he was in a more secure spot than he was based on the whip count that they had.
You know, not surprisingly, you're being a former governor, a former member of Congress. Your name is being mentioned in the Washington circles as somebody that could possibly challenge Congresswoman Mace for that seat. Is there any possibility, and I know you would not run based on that, I know you love this country, you felt you left and you had not completed your work as a member of Congress, is there any scenario that you would run again?
You know, anybody who's been in politics for a long number of years never says never. I learned that a long time ago, but that's nothing I have plans for, nothing I'm aimed toward. I'm trying to, you know, keep these business fires I got going alive, which is its own daily struggle.
You know, from where you sit, it looks like America's democracy is unraveling. What you are seeing in the Congress is representative of what's happening in the country now. The divisiveness, the revenge, the vindictiveness. No one can agree. No one can cooperate. Americans continue to lose their way of life. I mean, we're not talking about House of Cards, some Netflix or HBO drama. What is happening in Congress now is better than any drama series ever been put on TV, and it's true and real. What hope does it give to the American people for true leadership and true governance in their best interest? Former Congressman and Governor Mark Sanford.
Well, not a lot, to your point. I mean, people are increasingly turned off and skeptical of what's going on in Washington and anybody who's there. You know, vote the bums out is not just sort of a casual phrase. It's what a lot of people believe. And yet I want to stress the point that you just made, which is the ridiculous level of divisiveness. At the end of the day, to Kevin's point, he said this in his sort of farewell address, you know, he had the support of 96% of the conference. You know, you can't do anything if you don't make 5% of the folks upset with what you're doing. You're not trying to do anything. You're gonna always have people pushing against you. That's just reality if you try to do anything in life. And so the idea of, wait, you know, I didn't get, you know, a full 100%. I was only at 96% not being good enough. You can't govern in that circumstance. And I would remind you of my own race back in whatever year it was when Trump came after me. I'd voted with him 96% of the time. And yet on a couple of issues, whether the debt and the deficit and the spending, which, again, a lot of folks sort of viewed as a blank credit card during that time, or a couple of other issues that were local to the district in South Carolina, I voted against him. But I voted with him 96% of the time, but only in the kind of crazy times we're living in can you then be viewed as an enemy, which is exactly the same thing that Tom Rice said. He said, you know, what's somebody that votes with Trump only 96% of the time? He's an enemy. And that is the breakdown of our democratic process when somebody expects a court of 100%. That is not the system that the founding fathers gave us. They gave us a reason-based republic where at times we could agree to disagree.
And finally, former Governor and Congressman Sanford, we know the White House is in chaos, which is the executive branch. Now it appears the legislative body is in chaos. Do you think this latest assures the Republicans that they could possibly lose the House in 2024 and embolden the Democrats with all the problems they have?
I think it'd be tough, simply because you have a Democrat in the White House, and historically that does not lean toward the Democrats in the House. So I that remains to be seen. I will say we're tripping over ourselves. I mean, the fact that Gates and this group would do this on the day they did it, at the very day that Hunter Biden is in court, is not exactly picking your time and in a way to watch out for the Republican conference or the ideals it's trying to advance. So, I mean, I don't know. I can't predict the future, but what I'd say is we're sure making some unforced errors that are going to hurt us in an electoral sense.
Former Governor of South Carolina and Congressman Mark Sanford, thank you so much for joining us on such short notice, and we look forward to talking to you in the future.
Yes, sir, as well.
When we come back, more on this topic and one of the most pressing issues facing Americans today, our invasions by migrants and illegals all across the United States borders. We'll talk about that and much more when we return on this Saturday, October 7th edition of the Armstrong Williams Show. This is Armstrong Williams, and I am here in San Antonio, Texas, at the International Airport, and you would be shocked at what a layover stop. This is for thousands and thousands of migrants on their way from the southwest border to host families or shelters across the country. Believe it or not, every night the federal government fills 5 757s with illegal immigrants, each of whom receive $1,000 and a cell phone under the cover of darkness. This is what is happening with your taxpayers' dollars. And if I were not here, it would be Ripley's, believe it or not. It's unbelievable. In the airports, coming in the still of the night, being shipped to places all across the country, New York, Massachusetts, Florida, South Carolina, Texas. Wake up, America. You know, it's fascinating. You know, my producers would have preferred not that I play it because they want it to look perfect. I don't really care how it looks. It's the message that's being sent. When you go to a place like that, Victoria, to San Antonio, are you shocked at what you just saw?
Absolutely. I mean, our border is a complete mess, and personally, I think it's all Joe Biden's fault. Look, President Trump wanted to build a border wall. The governor of Texas, Governor Greg Abbott, is doing everything that he can as a governor to secure the border, and Biden's telling him, no, that's unconstitutional. You don't have the rights to do that. And it's like, well, if you had been able to do this yourself, I wouldn't have to do this. I wouldn't have to send National Guardsmen. I wouldn't have to call upon my fellow governors to come down and secure our border to do what you don't want to do. And because you won't do it from the executive branch and from the presidency, we have to have governors that believe in a strong border step up and, you know, sacrifice their own National Guardsmen to go out and defend our border, because somebody's got to do it.
You know, that's a fascinating narrative from Victoria Churchill, who's an editor and commentator with Young Voices. And you know, it may have been my partial commentary had I not gone to San Antonio and spent a few days. And what I learned was actually shocking. Josh Barnard, who's on with us from San Antonio, Texas, and others, gave me an education that I was not prepared for. I know it's easy to say it's all the problems of Biden and Trump and Abbott are heroes in this, but Josh, you have a different story to tell about what's actually going on across the state of Texas. Welcome to the show, and please explain what we're talking about.
Sure. Well, I respectfully disagree with only half of that, right? Obviously, Joe Biden and the Biden administration, I guess the dark overlords that are actually running his administration, are to blame largely. However, Greg Abbott is the World Economic Forum's poster boy. He is on the same team as the Biden administration, and that team is the globalist Marxist, and there's absolutely nothing being done at the state level, that is constitutionally allowed to stop this. We could stop it immediately. We have the ability to do that, to shut down the border. We have the ability to drop them right back on the Mexican side, to put pressure on the Mexican government, as the previous federal administration did. But I would submit that, in fact, Greg Abbott, in fact, there's a colonia north of Houston that is, I think, well over 100,000 acres now, is set aside to house migrants, and is being developed and has been for a number of years now. And we've taken to calling it Abbott City, even though it's something, I can't remember the name of the colonia now, but the very same people that have funded and are the developers behind this kind of invasion camp are the people that funded and whipped for the impeachment of Tim Paxton. And that's because he was sniffing around and investigating all of the money laundering and all of the influence of the World Economic Forum and these globalist Marxist invaders. I mean, this is a full-scale war, and right now the governor of Texas is doing essentially zero to stop.
How do you respond to what you just heard, Victoria?
Well, I think that the World Economic Forum definitely does have a lot to do with it, because what being involved in these multinational organizations does is it promotes us to take the security of other nations before our own. Look, I don't think that the U.S. should exist just in a bubble and have absolutely zero involvement with other foreign entities, but we have to take care of our own borders and our own security first. And, especially as a conservative, I think there's very limited things that a government has to do, but I think that one of the things that a national government has to do is secure its own borders. Now, as you mentioned here, Democrats are finally changing their tune on immigration, and I say that is absolutely wonderful. I ran a piece just in Real Clear Politics this Tuesday about how Democrats are losing with this issue, losing big with their own base. Harvard-Harris poll from last month found that 53% of Democrats believe that illegal immigration is getting worse. When you look at issues, for example, like sanctuary cities, those issues are split more evenly 50-50 among probable American electorate. But with 53% of Democrats, that means that number nationwide is 71% of Americans believe that illegal immigration is being worse. And, the way that I wrote it in that piece, I was saying that if they don't fix this, they're going to lose the presidency and they're going to lose the Senate. Because personally, I think that there are kind of good and bad ideas that both Democrats and Republicans have, and I think we do need comprehensive immigration reform where we both secure our border but also make the legal immigration process easier. I say that as an immigrant that's married to another immigrant. It took my family 11 years to get citizenship in the U.S. I came here at the age of 3. My husband also came here for college, and it took him 6 years to get citizenship. But my family's been through it the right way. And so saying that you're pro-border security also doesn't mean that you're anti-immigrant. Those two things often get conflated, and they really shouldn't be. And so if Democrats can't work with Republicans to get comprehensive immigration reform that addresses both of those issues, they realize they're going to lose, because Republicans in the House have passed legislation that would both secure our borders and make the lives of legal immigrants easier. But the Democrats in the Senate aren't on board. And until they get on board, this is a very, very, very key issue as we look at the next election heading into 2024.
Bruce, finally going to get you on board here. Just a lot of a serious conversation here. It's interesting because what broadcast should be about, we're not here to favor any party. We're here to favor what are the facts and what is the truth. And I would have thought that Abbott was a hero. I mean, but to hear what people say on the ground in Texas really shocks me, of the different roles that are played that continues this migration and illegal immigration. And like Josh said, it's like an invasion, and what it's doing to our country. We won't even know until years later whether it's terrorism. We have no idea whether it's the Chinese, the Nigerians, the Haitians, the Nicaraguans, the Venezuelans, the El Salvadorans. I mean, we saw a little of everything when we were on the border. And what you just saw in that video, and I was determined to show that video, that's just one of 100 processing centers in the state of Texas alone.
No, I understand. I think the issue may be a little more complicated. Number one, it's very clear under the Constitution that immigration is exclusively entrusted to the federal government, the Congress of the United States. The Congress really has done nothing since President Reagan's 1986 Immigration Reform Act to try to adjust or change the dynamics on the border. And that has been true whether you had a mixed Congress, all Republican Congress, or all Democrat Congress. It's an example of massive congressional dereliction.
On both sides.
They don't, on both sides. They do not want to vote on it. In some sense, they want to keep it a wedge issue. They don't want to solve the problem. They think they can raise money off of this. That's how cynical they are. But another true problem is that there's a huge demand for that labor. Business likes it. It drives wages down. Most of the immigrants that come in illegal, they want to work because they're fleeing countries where they're starving to death because they got Marxists. This is Venezuela, Maduro, Cuba. We know it's been a communist tyranny ever since Castro. And so they want to work, and the business is eager to hire them. Why wouldn't they? They're very industrious. They have a lower crime rate.
Wait a minute. Did you not hear what Victoria said about she and her husband, about their pathway to citizenship? Shouldn't you respect that process and still get to the point of finding people, if they respect that pathway, to do those jobs that you're saying that are being neglected?
No, I'm in favor of it, but I'm saying, look at how many years she had to wait. The people who are coming over to the border
But it makes
don't
you
have to wait.
respect the fact of what citizenship means in this country.
Yeah, but remember, they're not stupid. Armstrong, they're out for their own good. They saw all the legalization came under the 1986 Act. So they're calculating based upon historical experience. We come here, we're illegal, then our numbers are going to be 11, 12 million, and then there'll be kind of an amnesty. They call it an amnesty or something like that. And that's what they're counting on. They don't want to wait another 5 or 10 years. Many of them be starved to death in some of these countries like Venezuela. I'm not trying to applaud what they're doing, but I think one of the reasons, if you had a legal immigration system that enabled people to get legal status in 2 or 3 years' time and not wait decades, some I've told waited 20, 25 years. At that time, when you're living in these really, really terrible tyrannies, you're dead. You're already killed by a gang. You're already starved to death. You're already out of business. And people want to survive here. There are obviously a few bad apples in there in any kind of large group, inevitably. So it's just one of these things. It's a very, very complicated problem. And one of the things we have, too, we need to recognize is that because we do have other interests, that we impose economic sanctions on Cuba and Venezuela because we don't want to suggest that their tyrannies are acceptable, that increases the illegal immigration flow because they now have basket economies. They can't operate. We basically made them.
It looks like we're about to have a basket economy, Bruce.
Armstrong,
what about the way
you need to go live there compared to the United States.
Bruce, if this continues, the United States will look like those countries.
Maybe, but that's up to Congress to decide.
But
They're the ones who are doing nothing.
They don't have the balls to decide.
That's only because American voters are not throwing them out of office, which is what I've complained about for a long time. Why do the American voters continue to return to office people who are grossly derelict in their duties to vote? They will go up and tell you when you ask them, I don't want to vote on this issue. We don't force us to vote on money to Ukraine, on wars, on immigration. We don't want to vote. We'll just blame it on the executive, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. And that's why we're in a logjam. We may go down the drain. I think the long-term future of the United States is very bleak, precisely because of that reason. The executive is not omniscient. The executive makes stumbles all the time, and Congress is giving him a free hand to do whatever you want, and we're going down the drain.
And we'll be back. Don't go away. I am seeking asylum. That is all you need to declare when you come to any border in the United States. And guess what happens when you say, I am an asylum seeker? You get free food, free clothing, free lawyers, free housing, free transportation. You don't have to work. And let me tell you what the lawyers will do for you at the taxpayers' expense in the United States. They will tell you what to and what not to say just so you don't get in trouble. And guess what? You have 3 to 6 months before you even have to register to go to your court hearing to start the process. No, not 36 months, 6 months to 2 years. And guess what? You have 10 years before they even throw you out of this country, before you have to become a United States citizen. You know what happens to the majority of those people in those 10 years? They disappear throughout this country and never be to be found. And listen, you get medical care, you get mental health care, you become legal. All you have to say, Victoria, I am an asylum seeker. What other country would allow that?
Well, you know, it is absolutely insane what we give illegal immigrants. And the thing that I always say is, personally, I believe as a legal immigrant whose family it took over a decade to get citizenship, I believe that actually legal immigrants are the ones most hurt by illegal immigration. And let me tell you why. Here's the thing, is that people that come here, as Bruce mentioned, you know, work jobs, whether you're on an H-2B visa or an H-1B visa, you come here for the promise of the American dream, for the promise of economic prosperity. And guess what? Immigrants do things like start businesses. They work very high-paying jobs, and they pay a heck load of taxes on them. And so what happens before you even get citizenship is really kind of the opposite of what America was founded on, right? Taxation without representation. You get taxed for 10 years plus before you even get citizenship, and you can't even vote for the people that decide what to do with your tax dollars. So that's point number one. Point number two is the thing that I always think is absolutely crazy is the idea of illegal free tuition for illegal immigrants. So my husband came to this country for college as an international student. As an international student, you actually pay more for college than both an in-state student and an out-of-state student. But if you walk across the border illegally to pretend like you just care about the American dream and you want to chase it, you get that for free. My husband had to work 3 jobs in college to pay his tuition that was higher than the rest of his peers. But if he had just walked across the border and not registered, he would have just been given that college for free.
Josh, go ahead, Bruce.
I was going to say, it's a little more complicated. Again, I don't want to repeat myself, but for example, I have a client who applied for asylum. He's been begging for a hearing, right, for over 5 years. I wrote to the Immigration Service. We want an accelerated hearing. We don't want a free pass. And you can't just claim asylum. You have to say you have reasonable fear of persecution if you return to your country because of race, religion, ethnicity, nationality, or membership in a social group. Now, some people don't know the magic word, so they get kicked back until you're just an economic migrant. It isn't as easy as you suggested. But there are people who are demanding, we want the asylum hearing. We want to show we qualify, and they're waiting 5 and 6 and 7 years. And the reason why they're doing that is right now, the people who get all the attention are the most recent immigrants that they're trying to expel immediately and say, you need to go apply for asylum in Mexico or some other place. So it's not all the immigrants just trying to evade the system. And knowing that tyranny is abroad, these are genuine claims. You're telling me that Maduro isn't creating a reasonable fear of persecution if you oppose him in Venezuela? They don't qualify? That's the law for the United States applying its own laws. We'd say the immigrants ought to comply with their own laws. The United States ought to as well. If you want to change the law in the United States, there's a way to do that. But many of these claims are thoroughly valid, and they're trying to get them adjudicated, and the Immigration Service won't do it. This is my client's over 5 years. We can't, please give us a date. We still don't have one.
Josh, you're being from Texas. How do you respond to what you're hearing?
Well, first, I want to go back a little bit in this segment and correct something. The federal government is, in fact, not in charge of immigration. They are given in Article 1, Section 8, the authority over a uniform route to naturalization, and naturalization is not immigration. If you cross the Rio Grande illegally, Texas, per the 10th Amendment and our own state laws, absolutely has the right to take you and throw you out, period, or put you in prison, right? That's a fact, and that's why I say Greg Abbott and the state officials here are not doing anything. They're on the same team as these globalists. Yes, there are persecuted people, absolutely, that have a legitimate asylum claim. They can also get asylum in, Mexico and Europe and other places. And yet we have this funnel coming up to the Darien Gap of what will probably exceed 3 million people this year. Not all of those claims are legitimate. In fact, the overwhelming majority are not legitimate. They're coming for the $2,200 a month. They're coming for the free health care. They're coming for, all the social benefits that our own people don't even get. And thank goodness, because it's failed. What we're witnessing here is weaponized migration. It's what Stalin and Mao did. This is historically precedented. We know exactly what's happening. It is to dissolve our borders, to diminish our sovereignty, and to dilute our cultural bindings in such a way that, we can no longer fight economically. And it's to break down dollar hegemony. This is clearly a global central banking issue. And yes, there are individuals caught up in it that maybe should have asylum. And I'm glad there are great barristers out there fighting for those people. But the reality is you wouldn't have to wait 5 years to get a hearing if we didn't have 3 million people a year illegally entering this country. And
Josh, there are only 100,000 judges in the entire country to process all this. Only 100,000. That is a nightmare, Victoria.
I absolutely agree. The current immigration system is a mess, and I think too many people don't want to go through it, which is why earlier in this segment I talked about how Congress really needs to tackle this problem at both ends, both stop the flow at the southern border, but also have comprehensive immigration reform so that families like my own, it takes them much less time to be here and become citizens. Because I personally believe that if you come here for an economic reason and you work a job that is very high in demand, make a lot of money, I think we should want to keep these people, because also what's happening, because things like the H-1B visa are a mess, is that we are actually losing to Canada. Some of our former H-1B visa holders, just a few months ago, Canada opened up a portal for people that had H-1B visas in the US and couldn't get them renewed and were kind of facing going back to wherever their home country was from. Those people were going and working for tech companies in Canada instead of here in the US and keeping those tax dollars here. So they're getting the knowledge and they're leaving. Now, kind of the other thing that we should really understand about the large impact of migrants, again, is that personally I believe that it's actually these cities that are where the leaders are politically aligned with President Biden, places like New York, places like Chicago, where the citizens are actually paying the biggest price, because these people call them, say that they are in control of cities that qualify themselves to be sanctuary cities, so they don't comply with federal law enforcement. And so their citizens end up paying the price with their own tax dollars, which are, again, because of liberal politicians, higher than the rest of the country. And so you just keep getting hit and hit and hit and hit. And I think that the polling that I mentioned earlier is an example of the fact that people aren't buying the rhetoric. People know what's happening to their tax dollars and they're fed up.
I said there was 100,000 immigration judges. It's only 1,000 immigration judges in this country. I thought about it. I said, I want to believe it was 100,000.
Yeah.
In my mind, Victoria, I want to say it's 100,000, but Josh, it's really only 1,000 immigration judges in the entire United States.
Yeah. And it's ridiculous. This is why it takes so long to get a hearing. And when you demand a hearing, when you want to have your case evaluated, you can't get one. I know. I have clients. 5, 6, 7 years, and there's nothing in sight. I would want to underscore this with regard to the immigration issue, that it is really disgusting that the politicians on the both sides, they don't want to solve the problem. They want to keep it festering because they think it's a wedge issue for their base. So they keep this outstanding and do nothing. They make speeches about it, but did they ever get together and get a consensus in the House and Senate? No. That's why it stays frozen forever. I mean, President Obama once, when he said, well, this is a matter for Congress, when came up with the child immigrants that were coming in, they wanted to give them some kind of temporary status in the United States. First he said, I can't do anything. Then he said, okay, the pressure was such, he just did it by executive order. Congress has never done anything with regard to his executive order's memorandum. Did nothing. They don't vote on it. So they just want to keep it a complete mess. And these children now, they're living in suspended animation. They don't know what they're going to do. Maybe another year, maybe not another year. And the Congress sits there. I go back. Until the voters says, Congress, unless you make the buck stop with you, we're voting you out.
I don't know why it's always rests upon voters to tell people of conscience what they need to do to protect America for generations to come. When we come back, Sheriff Louderback from Texas, who's been on the border, lives on the border constantly, is going to join this conversation, because you can never have enough time to talk about this important topic of immigration. We'll be back. If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com.
Yeah, I was going to say high school.
Okay, we're back. We're back. And welcome back to the broadcast. Sheriff Louderback, you have been listening to this conversation, and you have your own unique experiences on the border all across Texas. Share those with us.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Armstrong. And as the only person on this panel today who works currently down there week after week in Starr County, Zapata County, Hidalgo County, and the Rio Grande Valley, in some of the most violent areas that exist on the Texas border, on the southwest border. And this is not based on opinion. This is based upon facts that's verifiable through many sources. But the threat of the cartel is something that we cannot overlook in this nation. We have the cartel is running a worldwide travel agency. They're selling packages to come across. And I think people have to understand just how powerful and how empowered the cartel has become. We're right across the river from Cartel de Noreste, CDN, Cartel New Generation, Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Running humans, narcotics, and weapons, that they're stashing weapons on state property. Some of the most violent clashes that the rivals take place of, which are allowing bullets, 50 cal bullets, to come across the border into Texas land. We've had excursions as far as 80 miles into Texas with armored vehicles. What are they doing here in Texas that way? I've said from day one that this threat is coming to Texas and it's coming to other states. The empowerment of the cartel and what they bring, a wholesale economy. Right now, the Darien Gap is completely full of people. They're not farming anymore in Guatemala. They're running humans. They're running humans for the cartels in there. We have 10,000 right now in the Darien Gap, and this is how you measure folks that are coming into Texas. And when you look at this picture, very realistically, you can talk about immigration, you can talk about what Abbott's doing or not doing, but if it wasn't for Texas right now, we'd be in a bind. The $10 billion that the legislation approved with the Texas Military Department in place, Border Patrol and Texas Department of Public Safety, GLO employees. This, we are controlling a major amount of what's going on. Plenty are coming in the asylum because it is the venue of the federal government. When we gave our border away, starting in 1918, 1919, we funded Border Patrol in 1920, and we gave all of our border away to the federal government. We could not foresee, we could not envision what a president would do. The catastrophic issue that this president has gotten involved in with these policies, and they are catastrophic in so many ways. But it's the threat of the cartels and their infrastructure they put in place here in the United States, which is very concerning. The national security level of our state has gone down, and that is a true threat. It's verifiable, and it's a disaster. Quite frankly,
how overwhelming?
Terrible.
How overwhelming are our border agents, Sheriff Louderback?
Well, if it wasn't for Texas Military Department in Texas, they would not be able to exist. We would not be able to do what we're doing today if it wasn't for the Texas Military Department. Outstanding troops. They are the difference makers in so many ways. Keep what's little of the morale up from a defeated Border Patrolman who his government has betrayed him and her. If it wasn't for the Texas Military Department and DPS and other state agencies that have come to this battle to try and hold on and try to hold the line and survive to 25 is my new motto.
Josh, your comments listening to your sheriff from Texas?
Yeah, I don't disagree with the overwhelming majority of what was just said. I do think that the treaty in 1918 does not supersede the Constitution. The Constitution does not expressly give that border to the United States government. It only gives the right to naturalization. And so I do think there is a step to be taken here. And I mean, I saw the 178th Engineering Battalion the other day cutting razor wire, you know, and that's a Texas military organization. I don't know what's going on there, but I see stuff like that, and I think, well, everything the sheriff is saying is right. You know, I was in Rio Grande City the other day down in Star. It's obviously an unbelievable mess, and Texas is definitely the tripwire, but we're not handling it. Like that $10 billion and all the work that we're doing, I think it's a fallacy to say that we're handling this. This is absolutely weaponized migration. It is, we're witnessing the fall of the American Republic, and we got people arguing about how, you know, we weren't consensus building with Kevin McCarthy. And the reality is he should, you know, probably be arrested. Like, he's derelict in everything he's done. He made deals, he lied. We've got this going all over the place here in Austin. We need help. We need people to understand that this is truly the fall of an empire, and right now is not the time to waffle. We've got to stand in the breach.
Sheriff Louderback, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think, you know, it's real easy to sit back and criticize the governor for what he hasn't done or the things not done in this area. And I'm not going to join in so much on that. There are some very real situations that go on down here day to day. And I'm in Rio Grande City every week, and down on Fronton Island, which is 170 acres of island that the state is clearing. We're going to clear that off, make a sandbar of that to defeat the cartel in that area. But you know, we're a rule of law state, rule of law country, and you know, I've heard many times and debated many times over what Governor Abbott could do. Could do different in this area, but he's going to face a Justice Department that's weaponized. The arrest of Texas peace officers is a very real possibility in this area. So he's been very concerned about that, and you know, I think everyone has to when you start looking at what this Justice Department could do. So that's very scary. But you know, the cartels again are running a parallel government in Mexico. And a lot of this problem has to start and end with Mexico. So I think the economic sanctions, I'd like to see those stepped up. And I'd like to see the change of direction with AMLO, the president of Mexico, because, you know, he's accepted the cartel in so many ways that is very detrimental to our state and our country. And I think he could be made to change some of his policies and help in more areas here. And I think that's an area that Abbott could really consider improving that area there, because so much of this is occurring in their country, and they're very likely now worse than Colombia was under Pablo Escobar. They're a narco country in so many ways that. And that's not good for our state, not good for our nation, as they continue to run humans and drugs into this country and expand on the violent activities that they're involved in every day.
Victoria?
Well, I just want to say kudos to you and your team for bringing law enforcement officers in past and current into this conversation, because they are such a key component of this. Now, you know, in my day-to-day role as a writer and an editor at American Liberty News, I constantly talk to law enforcement officials from all over the country that see the effects of Biden's border blunders in their own community. Now, I've talked to several officers that say really anywhere is a border county. This idea of every county is a border county, where the fallout from what's happening on our border is affecting law enforcement officers from all over the country. One in particular I talked to was a sheriff in Virginia, Culpeper County. Sheriff Jenkins, you know, he's stark. He's definitely along the lines of a constitutional sheriff, constitutional conservative. And, you know, he is having to deal with the fallout from this policies in his own backyard, whether it's drugs, smuggling, human trafficking, illegal guns are being trafficked along with drugs and individuals. And they are having these massive busts in Culpeper County in Virginia, 2 hours outside of Washington, D.C. And so this is an issue that does not stop at the
and
border
it's an issue,
it's not
Victoria,
being
that we're going to continue to discuss. I want to thank our earlier guests, former Governor and Congressman Mark Sanford, Bruce Fein, Victoria for joining us, Josh Barnard, Sheriff Louderback. Thank you all for joining this edition of the Armstrong Williams Show. And a shout out to 24/7, WJLA.
Thank you.